So somehow I found where you guys are, and I just showed up.
And that, for anyone who is listening, that is over an hour ride.
Yeah.
Like, that isn't just like, oh, I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop by. Like, you intentionally went over an hour to get here, to knock on the door, not knowing if anyone was here.
Well, that's just it. So I didn't really knock on the door because the door was open.
People of Creston City, people everywhere around the world, this is David Christopher Pacheco.
Hi, my name is Kimmy.
My name is Arthur Ortiz. Been in Denver since 1973.
Okay, so let's just talk in circles for a little bit.
Talk in circles, just shoot the breeze a little.
Now they see beyond what I look like and see what my actions are and say, hey, that is a good person.
A lot of people say home is where the heart is, but my heart's in many places. It's just I don't know where home is.
Welcome back to Homeless But Human. Here with you today is Blake.
And here with you today is Shayla.
And we have a special guest who is not a part of Christ in the City directly, though you could say his love of the program and our love of him makes him about as close to a member of the missionary crew and staff as you can get.
True.
So we welcome Michael
Vanderberg
from Dayton, Ohio. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Blake. So honored to be introduced in such a familial way.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We do. We consider you family. He's been at the Christ in the City house in Denver all week long.
He has been.
Mm-hmm.
As we have many people who come and check out Christ in the City. It's a mutual learning for both of us. We've actually gone to learn from Michael. Michael's here to learn from us. So, Michael, who are you and what do you do in Dayton, Ohio?
So I am a child of God.
Amen. Let's go.
Who follows where the Spirit leads him
love it.
as easily as he can. No, I'm a native of Dayton, Ohio. I'm a lifelong Catholic, and I lead the Society of St. Vincent de Paul Dayton District Council, which is in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. And I've been in that role for about 7 years. Most people don't know that Dayton, Ohio has the largest homeless shelters in the United States. And they are run by St. Vincent de Paul Society.
Wow.
Which means they're run by Michael and his team.
Yeah,
Amen.
so we have a lot before us that God calls us to do in our mission. The society was founded almost 200 years ago as a lay association of the faithful. And so we try to be faithful in what we do and serving the poor and practicing corporal works of mercy.
Beautiful. How many shelters do you operate?
We have two.
Two shelters? Okay.
In Dayton, we have two. And then I have colleagues across the country that operate about another dozen or so shelters.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Right.
And Michael, so one of the things about our relationship with him is we've talked many times and had our missionaries on this podcast about our 3-week summer of service program. And Dayton, Ohio, the two shelters in Dayton are one of the locations that Michael has welcomed us to, and we send our team there every year. So since maybe 2019,
2021 was our first. So we had four times.
Yeah,
now.
so we've gone to Dayton, and it has been a true remarkable experience where Michael has taken a different approach with the poor there. Truly taught his team, welcome to the poor. And Michael, what would you say, right? Like, what is your goal with serving and care for the poor that you have tried to instill? What is your dream for St. Vincent's?
Well, like the Christian ideal is that we want to go to heaven and we want everyone else to go to heaven, right? We're there to practice the Great Commission, to go and share the gospel, the good news. And that's what we do. So loving people where they are is huge for us. We focus on the basics, clothing, food, and shelter. And then we try to encounter folks as deeply as we can. Mm-hmm. So that's a tall order when, we're working with about 4,000 individuals every year.
Wow.
We have about 80 full-time staff and several hundred volunteers that regularly volunteer in shelter.
Wow.
So the other challenge is that, the staff and our volunteers, they come from a lot of the same brokenness that our homeless guests come from. And so we all have to learn how to love through our own brokenness and, share the love of Jesus with our guests. And
Isn't
that's
that
what we focus
truth?
on.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been remarkable to see Michael continue to dive into that, which is why you're here today, why you're here this week with us. So what has drawn you, what interested you to Christ in the City and our approach to service to the poor?
Well, 7 years ago, when I first answered the call to lead this ministry, I was working at the Archdiocese of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And I spoke with many of my colleagues who were engaged in new evangelization and getting advice from them on, what resources I could access. And one of my colleagues was really excited to tell me about Christ in the City. That's when I first learned about it. And so I knew right away that your ministry was something that I needed to learn about, that I needed to learn from and perhaps partner with. And that's what got me to wander in a few months later to your headquarters here in Denver.
Can you tell us about that first wandering into Christ in the City?
He's a door knocker.
I'm well known for just showing up and knocking on people's doors, and I have my staff do that too, but that's another story. I had a conference here. The National Society of St. Vincent de Paul had a conference in Denver in the fall of 2018 at the Gaylord.
Yeah.
And I remembered from my colleague telling me that, hey, Christ in the City is headquartered in Denver. And I thought, there's going to be a boring session or two one afternoon that I don't really need to be in.
At a conference, never.
Yeah, so I
never.
Yeah, so I can hop in an Uber and go find the place. And so
Perfect.
So somehow I found where you guys are, and I just showed up.
And that, for anyone who is listening, that is over an hour ride.
Yeah.
Like, that isn't just like, oh, I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop by. Like, you intentionally went over an hour to get here, to knock on the door, not knowing if anyone was here.
Well, that's just it. So I didn't really knock on the door because the door was open. So I came in and I'm kind of wandering in the hallway, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I figure, someone's going to notice that some strange guy is standing here. And lo and behold, Erica comes out, and we strike up a conversation, and I had I think an hour-long conversation with her, and that got the ball rolling.
Amazing. And then from there, you got set up with Christ in the City to do a summer of service. Like, how did you get from that initial meeting to bringing some of our missionaries to come to the Dayton shelter? Yeah,
so I had this pull on me constantly about we have to bring this together. We have to bring this together.
Yeah.
And so Blake and I got connected, and then the pandemic came. We were originally going to have a team come, and then the pandemic came, and so that kind of delayed things a bit. But no, it everything has always just clicked.
Yeah, it really has.
And even when we've had some challenges with various aspects of, bringing everybody together and conducting their ministry, both on the streets and in our shelters, whatever challenges that came up, we just surmounted those.
Yeah, totally.
And we were able to persevere, and it's all been so great and so fruitful.
Yeah.
I mean, we see the fruits of the Spirit in everything that we do with Christ in the City. So I'm just super excited to continue that, and that's why I came here this week. I wanted to learn more, and we've got more work coming up here in the coming months to help us out with some of our formation of staff, and it's just super exciting.
It really is. It really is. And Michael, so this 3-week program we do, it's 3 weeks long, right? And it's one of our questions of is it worth it? Is this 3 weeks worth it? And a lot of people ask that on foreign mission trips, domestic mission trips, just mission trips in general. Maybe you're a day volunteer and you're like, is it worth it? Right? And we have our answer at Christ in the City. We always, we know what we say. But from an outside perspective, right? Why is a 3-week, immersion in Dayton, Ohio, in your shelters worth it for you? Worth it to make the effort? And then maybe as a follow-up, what are your thoughts on short-term missions? Because there's some that, intention may be not the best, but yeah, based on how you answer that first question, I'd love to hear more thoughts on that.
Well, I can tell you the fruits of it. So the first time it happened, of course, nobody except me knew that it was going to happen. And so everybody came, and they were there doing their 3 weeks of ministry. And for the next 6 to 8 weeks, I got questions from people. Where did those nice young people go?
Wow.
They miss them, and even some of our homeless friends were asking for them by name for weeks and weeks and weeks. You know, where is so and so. So that's kind of the first indicator.
Yeah.
And then since we've gone through this 4 times now, this year there was super anticipation. When are they coming? When are they coming?
Yeah.
And that was among our staff and volunteers.
Nice.
So, you know, for us, having that extra energy that comes in, that is God focused ministry, you know, alive. There's a certain excitement around just that ministry of presence.
Yeah.
That is super beneficial for us. And now we're in this rhythm that it's actually being anticipated as well as missed when it's gone.
Yeah. That's something that I've wondered too with the summer of service, the 3-week programs, that it can do a lot in those 3 weeks, but what are like the more lasting effects that you've seen at your shelter? Or maybe this is being worked on right now and implemented through the staff going downward, but like, what are the effects of a summer of service on the shelter?
Yeah, so now we have a familiarity where between St. Vincent and Christ in the City, so that my staff and volunteers are familiar with you, and you guys are familiar with us, and so that raises a trust level, so that we can take conversations to a deeper level on things like spiritual formation, for example. People are craving unity in this age of disunity, but it's hard for them to put a finger on it. But when they see young people come in and witness that sort of unity, witness that togetherness, that's super powerful for us.
Yeah, I imagine it brings a sense of hope to them too.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not just a vague hope. It's a Christ-centered hope.
Yeah, because as Michael, you know, his employees, those who work in these shelters, are true servants of the poor, right? They're doing these things that need to be done, right? The taking care, the cleaning, the housing, the food. And at the same time, the goal is for the team to do it with that sense of encounter. Yeah. But to have this group of young adults, you know, 4 to 6 Christ in the City missionaries and maybe 6 to 10 unaffiliated with Christ in the City, but there for those 3 weeks, it's like this almost emphasis on that personal approach, that encounter, which the poor then see of like, oh, hey, these employees, they want that too, right? Like they invited them in here. This is mutual. That's what they want for me. And even when we serve, just those little reminders of like, hey, they see me first, right? They wanted this. They wanted people to come in, and Michael still desires that. And it's such a gift, such a gift.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to see how the mission of Christ in the City can be sort of molded into these different areas. Because if you're looking from the outside looking in, you might know that our missionaries walk the streets in downtown Denver and Philadelphia, and they are going on routes and they're coming across the same people. But that same mission of encounter can be transmitted to a place. Okay, we're going to, we'll host a lunch in downtown Philly, downtown Denver, and we invite our friends to come every week. Or we're going to consistently go to a shelter. For a 3-week program, we're going to go to a shelter for 3 weeks. And I just think it really speaks to what the point of the mission is. It's not only just to go to those on the streets, but it's those in the shelters. We have new initiatives this year of us going to nursing homes and visiting prisons and going to visit those who are genuinely lonely and genuinely lost. And so I think it's really cool that you've invited them to the shelter and that you've allowed the missionaries to come in and bring in this mission. But then, I guess another question for you would be, how have you seen, or maybe there's some like practical approaches that the missionaries take to your guests, that the missionaries take. How have you seen that affect your staff at the shelter, or how has that even affected your own approach to your guests at the shelter?
Well, even something as simple as individual attention.
Yeah.
You know, individual attention is hard to give in an environment where you've got 250 people in one setting, and there are 3 staff on hand to meet their immediate needs.
Yeah, you got to take care of them.
And so there's a lot of what the missionaries bring is this personal, eye-to-eye contact, learning names, just basic things, and consistency, even over 3 weeks, consistency of checking in on that particular guest. And as you noted, we by having these large shelters, we managed to collect people who would otherwise be spread out all over the city. So they're already in one spot. And one of the things I tell our staff is that, God has given us everything we need. Of course, we know that. But in particular, he's given us this gift of having the people that he calls us to specially love right in front of us.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of us just finding the time and the energy and the thought of how to encounter them as individuals and not as someone who just needs something to eat or someone who needs a piece of clothing or someone who needs to, be out of the elements.
Yeah. What motivates you to do that? Like, I'm just so, you're taking care of a lot of people, hundreds of people. And sometimes I'm imagining sometimes the bare necessities are like, that's all we can do, in this
or even
moment.
overwhelming because there's so many people.
Sure.
Well, this is something that you have to look forward to as a young organization that's looking forward to the future. We at St. Vincent de Paul in Dayton, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, my predecessors started doing this 40 years ago.
Wow.
We're about to start our 41st year of sheltering. And, shelters were pretty unusual in the early 80s, anywhere in the United States.
Didn't know that.
And this was a particular cooperation between the very strong volunteer arms of the St. Vincent de Paul Society and the city of Dayton that started again in the early 80s. So all that is to say, we're doing so much because of the inertia of it all. I mean, we're now sheltering over 99% of all the homeless population in the entire region, not just in our city, but in surrounding counties. And it all began with, one shelter at an old fire station that could hold maybe 60 people. And now our capacity is well over 700.
Wow.
Man.
That's huge.
Yeah. So so a lot of what we're doing is just kind of what's built up over the last 40 years. And that's kind of, that speaks to the maturity of the organization and how long we've been doing this and how trusted we are to do it.
We love stories, and I'm actually going to probably surprise you, but your story is interesting of how you got this role. And I say interesting because Michael he worked as a police officer. He worked in he was a major gift officer in the development world, fundraising world. He was an insurance agent. He had an internship on the Hill in DC. And then you took this job, right? And it's like, I'd love to hear.
Did you look at his LinkedIn profile before this? Wow.
No, he's told me this. But it's like, you were in so many roles that could have looked at the poor as a burden or a struggle or one of your biggest issues, right? Share about what changed in your heart when you took this job or the change in your heart that led you to take this job. I'd just love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for asking. That discernment story is a lot like many vocational discernment stories of young men and women that you've heard over the years. Kind of this gentle tug over time. So I would say that the height of my career as a working husband and father was when I was chief development officer for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. And so my office was at the corner of 8th and Walnut Street, and I had this amazing view from the 8th floor where I could, think big thoughts as I'm looking out the window, trying to come up with how to be successful in my work and my team. And every day I could look out that window and see across the street at St. Louis Church my friend William Brown standing on the corner.
Wow.
And he had been homeless at that point for probably 12 years before I knew him. And then for the ensuing 10 years, I accompanied him all the way to a nursing home.
Wow.
So I had very personal experience of accompaniment and, kind of learning how to love him and learning from him. And also I could be having the worst day and I would see William standing down there. I could hop on the elevator, go talk to him, and he'd always had a smile. He always told me how blessed he was. He always told me how God's good to him. And then all of my concerns and all my worries went away. So I learned about my own poverty of spirit and his own poverty of material poverty. And I just learned so much from that. And I just felt this gentle tug. And then so many years later, I had a a friend that I had met through my ministry work with the Archdiocese, and he's the one who asked me to consider coming over to lead it. So that's how it all started.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I mean, the things you learned from, accompanying William, one of the things that I'm thinking, actually, the first thing is patience. Right? I'm sure you were like, William, let's get you off the streets. Let's get you into a better spot. And it's like 10 years.
Yeah, I remember the first Christmas I knew him. I was so excited. I think it was LL Bean or something. There was some super clearance sale online, and I got him an awesome winter coat.
Oh, nice.
And I presented it to him, and he looked at me and he shook his head and he goes, "It's the wrong color."
No, you were probably.
He said, "I can't wear that." And I was just like, "What?" I'm like, I didn't know anything about, it never clicked for me that I needed to know more about him, to know about how to love him, and to know how I would be received by him.
Man.
So what was the right color? Did you get him a different color?
I did. I sucked it up and got the one that wasn't on sale, and I got him the color that he wanted. And thankfully he told me, because I learned later that when I give him stuff that he doesn't want, he would just throw it away. Oh. So I was able to repurpose that one for somebody else.
Yeah.
Man, but even there, it's like what you just said is getting to know him first. You would have known that. Or like asking those questions, and you knew him clearly. You knew his size enough. You knew to get him a jacket. So I'm not discrediting that you knew him.
Yeah.
But those are those little intricacies that when we go to buy presents for our kids, or when we go to buy presents for our siblings, you consider that of like, ooh, what are their preferences? And it's a beautiful thing when we can do that for the poor. And I actually love that he told you, because I would have hated for him to throw that away, or you never saw him wearing it, But maybe a little picky. We won't get into that, but it's this reality of like, we're all so human.
Well, but back to that point of the pickiness, over time I would learn that there's a whole lot of reasons why he's been on the street as long as he has, and this whole idea that we have a vision for people, that how we think they should be.
Yeah.
But God has a vision for them that is the perfect vision.
Yeah.
And what he's calling us to do is love them where they are, and take that as deep as we can, bringing our gifts to that, but also receiving what they have to offer us from God. And that was just such a powerful experience for me to realize that every person is an individual.
Yeah.
And there's nothing efficient about loving people one at a time. It's the least efficient thing there is, and it stresses you out, and it's super difficult. But it's what God calls us to do, and that's how we learn about love, and that's how we experience love. That's how we deepen our own love for each other and our closest relationships, and that's how we learn to get to heaven. Right?
Yeah. It's also just so human too.
Right.
Like we're dealing with humans that have needs and wants and problems and hopes, and it's messy. But like the willingness to enter into it and to accept that's the main part.
And what do we know? We know that the human soul is so deep and so mysterious in the way that it can continue to be uncovered, continue to unfold. It's like we can never fully know someone until, God willing, we're in heaven together. But what a great, Michael, you said that, and I want to highlight that of like, each person is a mystery. It's not fake. It's not a joke. It's like, and if we weren't a mystery, it wouldn't make sense why we had homeless. It's like, if there wasn't more to it, well, you're feeding these people, you're sheltering them. Why aren't they getting off the streets? Why are they in this cycle? It's like, no, the depth, the mystery of the human person, and encountering that. This is a very crude example, and I apologize for how crude it is, but like when we think of the difference between us and animals, right? Like we feed cattle, we give them a place to sleep, whatever, and then they're fed, they're taken care of, our pets, and that's all you need. There's no human being who walks to any of your shelters who that's enough. Right?
That's right.
That just won't do. If it did it, we'd have homelessness solved.
Right. And it's interesting that you mentioned the animal part, because one of the trends that we're all seeing is how we have fewer and fewer children in our society, more and more pets, right? And we're seeing that in shelter. So more and more people bringing their animals and, having this this sort of disjointed reality of, you know, what a community is, and
Yeah.
that we're here for each other, and that, you know, there's a certain order to things that is constantly crumbling, and we're trying to paste it back together.
Yeah.
And we want people to be stable in a home of their own. But as time goes on, we're more and more concerned that it's harder and harder to do that. That we're very concerned about people where people are going when they leave shelter. Not just the location of where they're going, but the context of that.
Yeah.
You know, is it a stable environment for them that's good for them? And it's really hard when we see people make choices to not get the help they need because they're concerned about their pets.
Yeah.
And that's just a growing problem.
That has to just gut you. I mean, just that would suck so bad.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very, very hard to see. And then when we become aware that, you know, there are children involved in situations like that, then, you know, we have to get children's services involved and that sort of thing. And it's so hard.
Yeah.
Where people today, they really have a hard time differentiating and prioritizing their needs between animals and people.
Yeah. Just the other day, we had some missionaries who were doing ministry in downtown Denver, and they came across a woman who really wanted help, but she had 2 dogs, and she wasn't able to get in anywhere to any shelter, because if any places did accept pets, it was just 1 pet, you know, it wasn't 2.
Yeah.
And so she was willing to stay on the streets just to stay with her dogs. And which I understand, like, these are very precious, you know, friends to our homeless friends, but it's not in the same dignity realm.
Well, we also see that in the area of disaster relief. That's becoming a new thing where people have the expectation that, you know, when organizations get relief supplies together, that they're also going to store pallets of dog food and cat food.
Interesting.
And you know, and sheltering accommodations for animals. And I think we can all agree that it's great when we can do that.
Oh, totally.
But to lift that to the same priority as caring for one another as humans, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah.
That's really just evolved in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's true.
We're not old enough to see that evolving, but Michael is. So that we'll take his word.
Got him.
But no, and even as you said it, Michael, it's like, what is the role of a pet on the street, right? It's like we see this all the time, and it's comfort. Like our friends are really, like, they are good for some animals, are good for some of our friends. So I want to highlight that. We're not saying they don't have a role. Like, we get it, right? And the second thing I'll say is we are made to sacrifice, whether we like it or not, right? It doesn't usually feel good, but we inherently want to sacrifice for something. And there's a beauty to our friends wanting to sacrifice for their animals. There's movies about it, right? Like, it tugs at our heartstrings. At the same time, what Michael said was key, is like, it's when it gets disordered.
Yeah.
It's to their own detriment.
Right.
And that's where it gets scary. Now, if they're willing to sacrifice and it hurts here, it doesn't feel good, but like their overall well-being isn't destroyed or at risk, okay, that's awesome.
Well, and to your point, also, not just to their detriment, but to the detriment of others.
Yes.
Whether it's their own children that aren't getting sheltered, or if it's other people in the shelter who are getting bit by their dog. I mean, there's all kinds of things that pop up when we have to plan around this. And all this is to say, the mission field has become more complicated by all this kind of mashup of priorities and that what's fueling this, and we haven't talked about it in this particular podcast yet, but you've been talking about it consistently. What's fueling it is, of course, these broken relationships, these severed relationships that we know are at the root of chronic homelessness.
Yes.
And so, you know, whenever we witness that further fragments how we can serve folks, it just illustrates how much the division that comes from individualism-driven choices as opposed to collective familial decisions to love one another. All of these have tremendous negative effects, and we just have to know that and be mindful of that as we move forward in this mission field.
Yeah, totally. As we're a very, person-centered organization and in
just
this
like
mission
you
field.
are,
Yeah. I think that's totally key. We have to keep the human person at the center, and like for the dignity of the one and of the whole, you know, of the all. So I really, I appreciate that you said that.
And to be willing to go deeper,
Yeah.
you know, of like, well, you know, it's like, this is the saddest thing you hear is when someone says this dog or this cat is all they have.
Right.
Right. And it's like, that's where we're called to step in, to show them that, hey, no, you're worth having a relationship with.
Right.
You know, that isn't all you have.
Yeah.
You know, you have and showing them that, right? Because Michael brought it up, and it's like the rupture of relationships, the isolation is only fueled by the individualism. And what can we do to fight that?
Right.
You know, even in our own lives, we all can be a little bit individualistic, you know, ooh, I like this, I like that. It's easier if I don't do it with anyone else, you know? It's messy when you get other humans involved. You know, animals aren't messy. We'll just bring them along. It's like, well, just watching movies, you know, it's like these realities of like the mess is worth it.
Well, and that's a very good point. Once you come to the reality that in their world, that dog or that cat is all they have, that is their lived reality.
Yes.
And, you know, so that's a challenge to us to respond to that. No, that's not all that you have. You have us.
Yeah.
You have me. And here's how you have me. And here's how I'm going to be here for you. You know, those are powerful things. But it's hard to do. It's much easier to focus in on, you know, the comfort of that choice.
And it's easy to say, it's harder to show, right? You could walk in there and someone's like, I can't go into shelter. I have my dog and it's going to be freezing tonight, you know? You could say, well, your dog doesn't need that. Blah, blah, blah. Like you can go into theology. That doesn't mean anything.
Right.
That means nothing. You have to show them. Like you can't tell them about a relationship. You have to initiate. Yeah. It's, I like what you said there though, of like, yeah, you got to show them. Like we all have to show our friends who may be struggling with individualism, like it's worth it. You know, you can't just tell them that there's false words, you know?
Yep. Absolutely.
This podcast took an interesting turn, and I'm glad it did.
But it shows, though, that reality of what our shelters are seeing and the complicated realities that Michael brings up. And it leads back to ruptured relationships. Shocker. Right? Shocker. And I don't think any of you listening will be surprised by that. But, you know, it's one that it's worth fighting for. Seeing Michael running one of the largest homeless shelter networks in the country, if not the largest, diving into this, like what an inspiration. It's even worth it for him. You know, and it's not just worth it for us who don't have a homeless shelter, you know, don't have services on those levels. It's worth it.
Well, for those of us whom God calls to this ministry, we're like moths to the flame. We can't stay away. It's a very particular being on the front lines of the in the field hospital, if you will, of that woundedness that our friends on the street and our friends in shelters are experiencing.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect moment to call out to anyone that's listening. If you are involved in shelter work or work on the streets with our homeless friends on the street, or maybe you volunteer at a soup kitchen and you're wanting to know more about this way of encounter, I really encourage you to reach out to us. You can email us at christinthecity at volunteer@christinthecity.org. If you're interested in just having a conversation, maybe we can, talk about how you can implement this way of encounter a bit more in your ministry. Maybe there is that tug on your heart and it's been there for a while. I encourage you to look deeper into that, and to reach out to us and, or reach out to people in your area that are wanting to do something similar, and use this approach of encounter. So please do reach out to us. We really would love to start that conversation.
Yes, we would. Michael, thank you for being here. Such a privilege to talk to you and be with you this week. And for all those listening, pray for Michael and his shelters as they are doing some courageous and heroic work there.
Yeah.
Thank you. We need it.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, God bless you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on Homeless But Human today. In order to keep producing this content for you all, we invite you to consider joining our known and loved monthly giving community. This is one of the most impactful ways that you can join us on mission. Your monthly gift sends missionaries out to the streets day after day and
and helps us to continue recording and sharing our podcast. It's our vision that every city not only has soup kitchens and shelters, but communities. We're committed to helping the homeless know that they have a home in us. And what is home but a small taste of Christ's infinite love? Visit christinthecity.org and make a monthly gift today to join our known and loved community. And if you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and go hit subscribe and leave a review. To get more involved with the mission, visit christinthecity.org.